Today's tech news moves fast, but understanding it shouldn't be hard. That's why Snarful Solutions Group brings you Connecting the Dots, where we break down what's happening in tech and why it matters to you. Now, let's dive in with your hosts.
Welcome to Connecting the Dots, brought to you by Snarful Solutions Group. I am Alex.
And I'm Morgan.
And today is Tuesday, March 31st, 2026. We've got a really packed show for you today, exploring our latest Morningstar Tech Report.
Yeah, we are connecting a lot of dots today, from software all the way up to space.
Exactly. But before we get into the heavy tech news, let's just set the stage for the morning. If you're traveling today, maybe double check your flights. There are currently about 306 active weather alerts across the U.S.
Right, which is quite a bit of activity for a Tuesday morning.
Yeah, though honestly, here in Sacramento, we can't complain. It's sitting at a really mild 65 degrees with just some light rain.
Not bad at all. And, well, the financial markets are certainly looking bright today, too.
Oh, absolutely.
The Dow closed up over 266 points yesterday, and the S&P is climbing right alongside it. Plus, if you're holding crypto, Bitcoin is sitting really comfortably over $67,000 right now. Nice. Love to see those green arrows. And just quickly on the sports front, the Giants managed to squeeze out a 3-2 victory over the Padres last night.
Yeah, it was a close one. It
really was. Sadly, the A's took a pretty tough 4-0 loss to Atlanta. But, you win some, you lose some.
That's baseball for you.
Right. So before we jump into our first story, we want to thank our sponsor, Strong Coffee. It is the premium instant coffee that tastes like a traditional brew, but is packed with 15 grams of protein, MCTs, and adaptogens like ashwagandha to give you clean, sustained energy without the jitters.
Which we definitely need for parsing through all this data today.
Oh, for sure. And promo code SNARFUL gets you 20% off your entire purchase at strongcoffeecompany.com.
Highly recommend it.
So let's jump straight into the Morningstar report. Because while the financial markets are doing great, the global software supply chain is, it's basically flashing bright red right now.
Yeah, bright red is an understatement. We are looking at a massive compromise involving a project called Axios. Right, Axios. Now, for anyone who doesn't write JavaScript for a living, you probably haven't heard of it, but I guarantee your digital life relies on it entirely.
Absolutely.
I always think of it like a universal translator between your phone and every single database on Earth. Like when your weather app needs data from a server, Axios is the courier making that request.
That is a really great way to conceptualize it.
Yeah.
I mean, the sheer volume is just staggering. Axios sees roughly 100 million weekly downloads on the Node Package Manager registry.
Wow, 100 million. A week?
Every single week, yeah. It is embedded in corporate dashboards, mobile apps, banking software. Pretty much everything modern relies on this library.
Which obviously makes it the ultimate target for an attacker.
Oh, exactly.
If you compromise the translator, you don't even need to hack a bank's heavily guarded database. You just tell the translator to hand over the keys.
Right, but the tricky part is attacking a project that massive directly on a platform like GitHub. Well, that would set off every alarm bell in the cybersecurity industry immediately.
So how did they actually pull this off without triggering those alarms? I mean, dropping poison directly into the internet's water supply seems like it should be noticeable.
You'd think so. But they bypassed the code entirely and went after the human element. Security researchers found that the attackers hijacked the account of the project's primary maintainer.
Wait, they just went after the developer directly?
Yeah, a developer named Jason Saman. They somehow managed to swap his registered email address to an anonymous Proton Mail account.
Oh, wow. So they completely locked him out of his own project.
Completely locked him out.
But, okay, even if I steal someone's digital identity, massive enterprise open source projects have automated security guards, right? Like, you can't just push bad code without a system checking it.
Well, you're talking about the CI/CD pipeline, the continuous integration and continuous deployment systems.
Right, exactly. Don't those automated tests usually catch this stuff before it goes live?
They usually do, yeah. Developers rely on them heavily. But because the attackers controlled the publisher's actual credentials, they just sidestepped that automated GitHub pipeline completely.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, they use a command line interface to manually force 2 compromised versions directly into the registry, specifically versions 1.14.1 and 0.30.4.
And what really stands out to me in the report is the speed of this whole thing. They hit 2 different release branches within 39 minutes of each other.
Which is incredibly fast.
Right. So that means any corporate system set to, automatically update its minor versions, it just pulled the poison pill immediately. No human ever even reviewed it.
Precisely. And the payload itself, I mean, it was a masterclass in deception. They didn't alter the actual Axios code at all, which definitely would have been noticed.
So what did they do?
They just added a single, seemingly boring dependency to the package manifest. It was a library called Plain Crypto.js version 4.2.1.
Ah, okay. So that's classic typo-squatting right there. It sounds exactly like a perfectly legitimate cryptography library that you would expect to see in a project like this.
Yeah, it completely exploits the cognitive load on developers.
Right.
You know, if you are scanning a list of 50 different dependencies, Plain Crypto.js looks completely normal.
Right, your brain just skips right over it.
Exactly. Researchers noted it was staged about 18 hours in advance by an attacker using the email nrys@proton.me. But, you know, it's the obfuscation inside this fake library that is just truly remarkable.
I want to dig into that mechanics of it, actually, because simply scrambling or minifying code usually still looks really suspicious to a good static analysis tool, right?
It does, yeah.
So how did this slip by entirely undetected by the enterprise security scanners?
Well, standard security tools scan for known malware signatures.
Yeah.
They look for suspicious IP addresses or, recognizable malicious commands. To beat that, the attackers used a two-layer custom encoding scheme inside a script called setup.js.
Okay, so they hid the actual instructions. How?
They used a reversed base64 encoding combined with an XOR cipher.
Okay, for the non-engineers listening, what does an XOR cipher actually do in this context?
Think of the XOR cipher as a very complex mathematical lock. They took every single character of their malicious code and applied a mathematical operation against it, using a specific key, the word order 7077, and a constant number, 333.
So it's essentially like sending a locked briefcase through the mail, and the instructions on how to build the key are literally taped to the bottom of the briefcase.
Exactly.
And the automated post office scanners, they're only checking for explosives, right? They aren't looking for abstract math problems.
Right. To the scanner, it doesn't look like an attack at all. It just looks like benign mathematics. It completely evades static analysis because the malicious commands literally do not exist in the file until the package is installed.
Wow.
Yeah, the post-install script just decodes itself directly in the machine's memory. And once it's decoded, it checks your operating system and delivers a highly tailored payload.
And that's where the operational sophistication really gets scary. According to the Morningstar report, on a Mac, it uses an Apple script to disguise itself as a normal system daemon.
Yeah, they deliberately named the process com.apple.act.mond.
So if an engineer opens up their activity monitor because, say, their laptop fan is running loud, it just looks like another completely boring Apple background task.
You never think to touch it. And on Windows, it's just as clever. It locates the built-in PowerShell tool and actually copies it to a totally new file named wt.exe.
Which disguises it as the official Windows terminal executable.
Yes, which is a very well-known technique to evade endpoint detection software. And on Linux, it simply uses the curl command to drop a hidden Python script.
Okay, but here's the thing. Once this remote access Trojan is actually running on your machine, it has to phone home, right?
It does.
It has to connect to the attacker's server to receive commands. That outbound network traffic should be a massive red flag.
You would think so.
Our sources noted it connects to a command and control server at the domain sfrclack.com on port 8000. How on earth does a corporate network admin not see that weird domain and block it instantly?
Because the malware heavily disguises its outgoing HTTP requests.
Yeah.
It makes them look like routine developer traffic. When it sends data out, it formats the request to look like it is just pinging the normal software registry.
So it's wearing a mask, basically.
Exactly. On Mac, it labels the outgoing data as connecting to packages.npm.org.
But wait, here is the brilliant, almost darkly funny part of this whole attack that I loved in the report. The domain npm.org does not actually belong to the Node package manager.
No, it doesn't.
The real software registry is npmjs.org. The domain npm.org has actually belonged to the National Association of Pastoral Musicians since 1997.
Yeah, it's a psychological trick just as much as a technical one.
Oh, totally.
A security system or a human administrator sees a quick log entry with npm.org in the URL. They just assume it is a developer's machine fetching a package, and they ignore it completely.
They see the letters npm and their brain just fills in the rest.
Exactly. The malware even spoofs its own identity, pretending to be Internet Explorer 8 running on Windows XP, just to blend into legacy traffic noise on corporate networks.
It is just incredible. The attacker gets full arbitrary shell execution, system fingerprinting, the ability to inject more binaries, basically total control of the network.
Control.
And then, the cherry on top, it performs the ultimate anti-forensics. It cleans up after itself.
It really does leave zero forensic trace. After executing, it deletes that setup.js script we talked about. It deletes the malicious package.json file that contained the hook.
Just wiping the fingerprints.
Exactly. And finally, it takes a clean, completely harmless file named package.md and renames it to package.json.
So if a developer hears about this Axios vulnerability on the news and goes looking in their own system folders, everything looks perfectly normal. The evidence is just vaporized.
It's gone. Security experts are saying that if you ran those affected versions, you have to assume total compromise. You're rotating every API key, changing every single password, and literally rebuilding your machines from scratch.
Which is a nightmare. And because modern AI development tools rely so heavily on automated package fetching, the report noted that AI packages like at Shodan and OpenClaw caught the infection almost instantly.
Yeah, it spreads like wildfire through automated systems.
That cascading failure in the software pipeline is deeply unsettling. But, that same mathematical inevitability of a hidden defect, it applies to hardware too.
It absolutely does.
Especially when you scale it up to the size of SpaceX's current ambitions. So let's shift our focus from the invisible code on our servers to the massive physical ecosystem of low Earth orbit.
Yeah, we're moving from millions of lines of invisible code to thousands of physical objects flying at 17,000 miles per hour above our heads.
Right. So according to the Morningstar report, SpaceX recently lost contact with Starlink satellite 34343. This happened on March 29th, while the satellite was orbiting roughly 348 miles, or about 560 kilometers above Earth. Now, there are over 24,000 tracked objects in low Earth orbit right now.
It's crowded up there.
Very crowded. So my immediate assumption when a satellite goes offline is a collision. Did it hit a piece of space junk?
Well, that would be the logical guess.
No.
But the data from Leo Labs, they're an American space radar tracking company, tells a totally different story.
Okay, what did they see?
They tracked tens of new fragments in orbit and explicitly attributed the event to an internal energetic source.
Wow. So it didn't crash into anything. It wasn't hit by a solar flare or some geomagnetic storm. It literally blew up from the inside out.
Yes, a spontaneous internal fragmentation event. And what makes this really significant is the pattern here. We actually saw a very similar internal anomaly cause an explosion just a few months ago, back on December 17, 2025.
Right, I remember that. Now, SpaceX released a statement saying that because of the relatively low altitude, these fragments will eventually just burn up in the atmosphere.
Yeah, they will.
And they pose no immediate risk to the International Space Station, the upcoming Artemis II launch, or their own Transporter 16 mission. But frankly, the current debris isn't what worries me. It is the trajectory of their scale.
Because scale fundamentally changes the physics of risk. Right now, SpaceX has roughly 10,000 Starlink satellites in orbit. But as they prepare for this massive, record-shattering initial public offering, their expansion plans are honestly almost difficult to comprehend.
Yeah, the Morningstar report noted that in January, they submitted a request to the FCC for approval to launch up to 1 million satellites.
1 million.
1 million. And these aren't just simple internet relays anymore. They are AI-driven satellites designed to act as orbital data centers.
Which completely shifts the risk model of the entire aerospace industry. Historically, if you manufacture 10 bespoke satellites, you have human engineers inspect every single weld, every single circuit board, and every battery cell.
Right, it's artisanal almost.
Exactly. But when you are mass manufacturing satellites on an assembly line to reach a constellation of 1 million, you are applying the software industry's rapid scaling mentality directly to aerospace hardware.
And that brings us right back to the mathematics of failure we just talked about with the Axios supply chain attack.
Yep.
If you have a manufacturing defect rate of 1 in a million and you launch a few hundred satellites, you're statistically pretty safe. But if you launch 1 million satellites, that hidden internal vulnerability goes from a statistical improbability to a guaranteed physical event.
Multiple guaranteed events, in fact. SpaceX President Gwynne Shotwell actually noted recently that she was surprised the 1 million satellite request didn't make bigger waves in the press.
Well, the aerospace community is certainly paying attention now.
Oh, without a doubt. An internal energetic explosion inside a constellation of 1 million objects drastically increases the risk of a chain reaction.
The Kessler syndrome.
Yes, exactly.
Where one explosion creates shrapnel that hits another satellite, creating more shrapnel, until low Earth orbit basically becomes an unusable blender of flying debris.
Is the physical atmospheric equivalent of that malicious code cascading through an automated registry.
It really is. The underlying theme here seems to be our immense reliance on automated quality assurance. SpaceX says they are investigating the root cause and will rapidly implement corrective actions.
Right, but a hidden vulnerability sealed inside a metal chassis in the vacuum of space is infinitely harder to patch than a line of code on a server.
Oh, absolutely.
It requires us to place absolute trust in the mass production systems of a single private company.
Okay, so we have radar systems searching for anomalies in orbit, and we have security scanners searching for anomalies in our code. But what about the technology we use to monitor the internal anomalies of our own bodies? Let's bring this down from the atmosphere right down to your wrist.
Yeah, we are shrinking the scale down to the ultimate frontier here, human biology.
We are looking at reporting on the wearable tech company Whoop. They just raised a staggering $575 million in a Series G funding round led by Collaborative Fund.
That is massive.
It rocketed their valuation to an incredible $10.1 billion.
And much like SpaceX, Whoop is aggressively checking off financial milestones as they prepare for their own IPO.
Right. Now, for you listening, if you aren't familiar, Whoop makes those really popular screenless fitness bands. They track your physiology 24 hours a day, your sleep stages, your cardiovascular strain, and your heart rate variability.
They're essentially acting as the Leo labs for the human body.
That's a great way to put it.
They're trying to detect internal energetic anomalies, like an impending sickness or severe overtraining, before you physically crash.
It's a perfect analogy, and the financial metrics validating this model are pretty remarkable. They are projected to hit $1 billion in annual recurring revenue by the end of 2025.
$1 billion purely from health subscription software.
Yeah. But what I find most revealing in the Morningstar report is where this exponential growth is actually coming from.
Right, the geography of it.
Exactly. The U.S. market usually dominates early adoption for continuous biometric tracking. But 60% of Whoop's 2025 sales were international.
Specifically, there is a massive push into the Middle East. If you look at this latest funding round, there is heavy participation from Middle Eastern sovereign wealth funds.
Exactly.
Specifically, the Mubadala Investment Company and the Qatar Investment Authority.
Wow, that is serious institutional capital. You don't get sovereign wealth funds involved unless you are building foundational societal infrastructure.
Exactly. Whoop's CEO, Will Ahmed, has positioned the Gulf Cooperation Council, or GCC region, as central to their long-term strategy.
Makes sense.
The region is investing heavily in forward-looking health, human performance, and longevity initiatives. Whoop is rapidly expanding their local teams and their retail footprint to capture that market.
They have even brought Cristiano Ronaldo on board, right?
Yeah, he's an investor in this round and a global ambassador now. He publicly stated that the platform is one of his most important tools for long-term health and performance.
Which is a huge endorsement. We are seeing a massive global cultural shift toward preventative medicine driven by continuous data monitoring.
But this brings us right back to our core theme today of hidden vulnerabilities. We are treating the human body like a complex software system that can be debugged, optimized, and upgraded, provided we have enough data.
Right.
Millions of people are trusting these algorithms to tell them when they're stressed, when their immune system is compromised, and how to govern their daily energy.
Which requires absolute, unwavering trust in the integrity of the data pipeline.
Exactly.
If the software reading our biometrics has a hidden vulnerability, like, say, a compromised dependency from an open source library, like we saw with Axios, the consequences aren't just a hacked database.
No, it is corrupted medical and physiological guidance.
Exactly. If I am generating 1 billion data points about my cardiovascular health, and that is being processed by a global entity, the security of that pipeline is just as critical as any enterprise software pipeline.
When you scale biological tracking to a global population, a corrupted algorithm could lead to millions of people misinterpreting their own health data simultaneously. The hardware on your wrist is really only as reliable as the massive, invisible cloud infrastructure processing its signals.
It's wild to think about.
It really is.
Well, before we wrap up today's show, we want to mention our sponsor, Old Glory. They are an iconic music and sports fan merch store, which is honestly great stuff for your techie friend or family member.
They really do have an amazing selection.
They do. And if listeners use promo code SNUFFLE at checkout, you can get 15% off your entire purchase. The website is oldglory.com.
Definitely check them out.
So just to recap what we've covered today, when you look at our Morningstar sources, you can see a pretty terrifying pattern emerging across all these domains.
Yeah, the through line is scale.
Whether you are a developer pushing code to the cloud, a citizen living under a sky rapidly filling with thousands of satellites, or an athlete trusting a wearable to tell you how your heart is doing, you are deeply embedded in these massively scaled networks.
And the health of every single one of these networks relies entirely on the assumption that we can detect and neutralize anomalies before they detonate.
Which, as we've seen, is getting harder and harder to guarantee. But here is a thought to leave you with today. We are rapidly moving toward a future where our most intimate biological data might be beamed up to one of SpaceX's million AI-driven orbital data centers, processed by software built on millions of lines of open-source code that no single human has entirely verified.
It's a house of cards built on algorithms.
It really is, and if we are completely outsourcing our intuition and our biological monitoring to AI, maybe the ultimate vulnerability isn't in the code or the hardware at all.
Right, it might be our total willingness to surrender our own physical intuition to the dashboard. As these systems become so incredibly complex and intertwined that human oversight is physically impossible, well, the greatest risk might simply be our blind trust in the machine to tell us who we are and how we feel.
Something to think about the next time you check your wrist to see how you slept last night.
Definitely.
We're here to help at Snarful, so reach out on our website if you have any more questions.
That's a wrap on today's top stories. Remember, tech doesn't have to be complicated, and we're here to help connect the dots. If you've got questions or want to learn more, visit us at snarful.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.